Picture a city the size of ambition. Now fill it with smoke so thick that on a November morning you cannot see the building across the street, and the building across the street is 4 feet away. Add the sound of 10,000 looms running simultaneously. Add the smell of the River Clyde at low tide, which is less a river smell and more an argument between rotting fish, industrial runoff, human waste, and something that died in the wall and nobody has found yet. Add coal dust settling on every surface. Coal dust settling on you, on the baby, always on the baby. That's Glasgow in 1847. The second city of the empire, they call it. The workshop of the world. A place where you could watch the future being hammered into existence at 1,000 foundries and then walk 20 feet and find a child sleeping in a doorway who looks like he arrived from a different century entirely. A city of absolute extremes. Merchants building palaces on Blitheswood Hill, their curtains drawn against the view, and down below in the salt market, in the winds, in the closes so narrow that coffins couldn't be turned without tipping them vertical. People stacked 8 to a room, 10 to a room, entire families in a single space barely large enough to lie down in. We're going back there tonight, not as tourists, not as reformers clutching notebooks. We're living it. One night, one tenement, one cold corner. Everything you would have seen, heard, smelled, and been afraid of in the dark. I make these history stories, and I genuinely cannot tell whether the people listening are fallen asleep or simply too horrified to move. Either way, you're here. Subscribe if you want. Get comfortable. But maybe pull the blanket tighter first. Here we go. The first thing you need to understand about the cold corner is that it's not a metaphor. It is a literal corner. The north-facing corner of a single room, 14 feet by 11 feet, that you share with 5 other people and all of the combined breath and heat and misery that 6 human bodies can generate in a small enclosed space. In summer, that corner is merely damp. In winter, and it is winter now, November 1847, with the rain coming horizontal off the Firth of Clyde and the wind finding every gap in the tenement wall, because the tenement wall has many, many gaps. In winter, that corner is where the cold collects like a living thing, and that is where the baby sleeps. Not because you want her there, because the floor near the fireplace is where old Mrs. Gilmore from the room above puts her bucket when the ceiling leaks, and the middle of the room is where you all sleep in a rough collective pile. You, your mother, your sister Bridget, and Bridget's husband Connell. And the baby cannot sleep in the pile because last week Connell rolled over in his sleep and nearly crushed her. And the screaming woke the family on the other side of the wall, and the family on the other side of the wall banged on the partition with something heavy, and everyone came awake at 3 a.m. into the cold and the dark, and it was a disaster of the first order. So the baby sleeps in the corner. In the small wooden box that used to hold Bridget's good dress before the dress had to be sold. With a piece of flannel you boiled clean and dried in front of the fire for 2 hours. In the cold corner, where you can see her from the door, where you can see whether she's still breathing, which is the first thing you check every time you wake in the night and the last thing you do before you close your eyes in the morning. Because that is the arithmetic of survival in 1847 Glasgow. You check whether the baby is still breathing. You check before anything else. Before you think about your own cold feet on the wooden floor. Before you think about the mill bell that will ring at 5 a.m. Before you think about the fact that there is no porridge left and won't be until payday, which is Friday, and today is Wednesday. You check the baby first. Her name is Mare. She is 4 months and 12 days old, and she has never been warm, not once, not for a single day of her short life, and somehow she is still alive, which is the thing that wakes you in the middle of the night more reliably than any church bell. The impossibility of her continued existence. Your eyes open in the dark. The room breathes around you. You can hear all of them. Your mother's slow wheeze. She's had the cough since September, and it is getting worse. You know it's getting worse, and there is nothing you can do about it that you haven't already done. Bridget's steady rhythm, deep in sleep the way only someone who has worked 14 hours can sleep. Connell's occasional snore, sudden and violent, and then nothing. And from the corner, almost beyond hearing, almost something you're imagining, the small catch of Mare's breath, in and out, in and out. You lie still and count 3 full cycles before you let yourself relax. She's breathing. Everything else can wait. Let me tell you about the room. 14 feet by 11 feet. You've paced it enough times in the dark to know it exactly. The floor is bare wood, the boards warped with damp so that they catch your feet at the edges. There is one window facing the close, the narrow passageway that connects the tenement to the street, and the window is small and the glass is so coated with soot on the outside and breath condensation on the inside that light barely makes it through even on a clear day, and clear days in Glasgow in November are not common. The walls are stone, dressed stone, the tenement built sometime in the early part of this century, and the stone was decent when it was laid, but the building has been subdivided and subdivided again since then, as the city's population swelled, as the mills opened and the workers came flooding in from the Highlands and from Ireland and from everywhere, as rents climbed and the landlords discovered they could cut their properties into smaller and smaller pieces and charge more and more per piece. What was once a tradesman's dwelling, a whole floor for one family, is now 3 separate rooms, each one let separately. Below you is a family you barely know, a man who works at the iron foundry and his wife and their 3 children, the youngest not much older than Mare. Above you is Mrs. Gilmore, who is 60 years old and lives alone and claims she used to be a weaver before the hand-loom trade died, and you believe her because her hands still move in a particular way when she talks, like she is working a shuttle in her sleep. On the wall to your left, the partition, which is boards rather than stone, which is why you can hear everything, is the Maloney family. 7 of them. You know them by sound, the parents. 4 children ranging in age from about 2 to about 12, and someone who visits late at night and leaves before dawn, who you have theories about but don't say out loud. The building you are in is on the old wind, not the new wind, the old wind. The difference matters. The new wind is bad, the old wind is worse. These are the streets that sanitary reformers talk about in hushed voices, and city councillors pretend don't exist, and cholera moves through with the efficiency of a man who has done this before, who knows exactly where to find the soft spots. The cholera came in 1832. You know this because your mother talks about it the way people talk about a war, in low voices, with pauses. The cholera will come again. Everyone in the old wind knows this the way they know the winter will come, and the mill bell will ring and the rent will be due on Friday. It is not a question of whether. It is only a question of when. But that is later. That is not tonight. Tonight there is just the dark and the breathing and the cold. You get up slowly, trying not to wake anyone. This is a skill. This is something you have practiced. The floorboard near the door creaks. You know this. You avoid it. You step over the particular boards in a specific sequence that you could do with your eyes closed, because you have done it with your eyes closed. You do it every morning at 4:20 before the bell rings at 5, because if you wait for the bell, you lose 20 minutes of being the first person at the privy in the close, and being the first person at the privy in the close matters enormously. There are 4 families on this landing. That's perhaps 22 people, give or take, and there is one privy, one shared privy, which is at the back of the close, which has a door that doesn't fully close, and which is cleaned, technically cleaned, by a scavenger who comes on Thursdays, which means by Wednesday morning it is the sort of situation that you approach with held breath and rapid movements. You pull on your dress in the dark. The dress is wool, brown, practical, and it has been washed twice since you arrived in Glasgow 14 months ago. Not because you are careless, because coal smoke means that washing something turns the water black and the water costs effort. Carrying it from the standpipe in the clothes, heating it if you have coal to spare, which you often don't. And because wet wool in a cold room takes 3 days to dry properly, and 3 days of damp wool makes things worse in ways you have learned about from experience. You find your shawl, you find your clogs. The clogs are too big. They belonged to your aunt before your aunt went to the mill and earned enough to buy leather boots, which felt like a miracle at the time. And they clack on the floor if you're not careful. You are careful. You step in the specific sequence. Left foot on the narrow board by the wall. Right foot angled to miss the nail head that sticks up near the window. Small step, turn sideways to avoid Connell's feet, which are always extending beyond where the rest of him has agreed to sleep. The door opens with the particular resistance it always has. The wood has swelled with damp, so that it requires a steady pull rather than a quick jerk. A quick jerk makes noise. You do not want noise. Out into the stairwell. The stairwell is dark in a way that the room is not quite dark. The room has mares breathing, and the faint orange edge of the banked fire, and the accumulated body heat of 5 people, and all of that adds up to something that, at 4 in the morning, feels almost bearable. The stairwell is cold stone and absolute dark, and the smell hits you immediately. The smell that is the base note of every tenement in the old Wynd, a compound made of the privy and the shared cooking that seeps through every door, and the damp that never fully dries, and the coal smoke that has been working its way into every surface for a generation, and underneath all of it, faintly, something else. Poverty has a smell. You didn't know that before you came to Glasgow. You grew up in County Roscommon, Ireland, where your family was poor, genuinely poor, potatoes and not much else poor, but the poverty was outdoors, spread thin over fields and bogs, diluted by wind and rain and space. You didn't know until you came to the old Wynd that when you compress that much poverty into that smaller space, it develops a particular character, a weight, a thickness. It gets into your clothes. You notice it sometimes when you're walking near the better streets, near Argyle Street or Buchanan Street, and a woman with a proper coat and a basket passes close to you and flinches almost imperceptibly and then keeps walking. You know what she smelled. You know it's you. You move down the stairs in the dark, one hand on the wall, because the stairs are steep and there is no railing. And a year ago a boy from the floor below, Padraig, 10 years old, the one with the red hair, fell on these stairs in the dark and broke his wrist, and the bones set wrong because they couldn't afford a proper surgeon, and now his right hand doesn't work quite properly, which is a problem for a boy who was supposed to work the mill machines, and so now he runs errands instead. One hand on the wall, feet placed carefully, cold stone through the thin soles of your clogs, even though you're wearing the extra pair of stockings you keep for winter, the ones with the darn at the heel that you redid yourself 3 times, because if you're going to darn, you're going to darn properly. You're your mother's daughter in at least that much. The privy, you're first. This is the small victory that gets you out of bed at 4:20 in the morning, the calculation that makes the cold worth it, and it is worth it. You stand there afterward in the close, in the narrow stone passage, and breathe for a moment. The city makes noises at night that it doesn't make in the day, different noises. The daytime is sound built on sound, a constant layering that after a while you stop hearing individually and just absorb as a kind of roar, a geological sound, the sound of a city digesting itself. The nighttime is quieter but not silent, and in the quiet you can pick out individual pieces. Somewhere down the close, water dripping from a broken gutter into a puddle, metronomic, patient. From the street, the distant sound of iron wheels on cobblestones. A delivery cart, probably, going to the market on Salt Market. The horse's hooves distinct from the wheel sound, a specific rhythm. 2 soft thuds, then the clatter, then 2 more. Thuds, voices, men's voices far enough away to be indistinct. Workers going to the early shift, probably. There are always people moving in Glasgow before dawn. The mills start early, the foundries start early. The city devours its daylight hours with a thoroughness that you've never quite got used to. Above you, through the floors, a baby crying. Not Mayor, this one is from higher up, from the Brennan family on the top floor. It cries for a while and then stops, which is the good outcome, and then starts again, which is the other one. You stand in the cold, close for a moment longer, hands wrapped in your shawl, and look at the sliver of sky visible above the tenement roofline. It is not quite dark. The city generates its own light, the furnaces, the gasworks, the 10,000 fires burning in 10,000 rooms, and it reflects off the low clouds in a dull orange smear that you can see even from the bottom of the close. Glasgow at night doesn't go dark the way the countryside goes dark. It just goes orange-grey, the colour of something enormous that has never fully cooled. You've been here 14 months. You're 21 years old. You have worked the cotton mill for 11 of those 14 months, and your lungs have been accumulating a fine white dust for every one of those 11 months. And you know this because you cough in the mornings, always in the mornings, a dry cough that brings up nothing but that feels like something is trying to work its way out. And you think about that sometimes, about what's working its way out, but not right now. Right now you need to go back upstairs and check on Myra before the mill bell rings and the day begins. By the time you're back in the room, your mother is awake. She's always awake before 5. You don't know when she started sleeping so lightly. Perhaps when your father died, back in Roscommon, 2 years ago, the winter before the real hunger started. But she wakes at the slightest change in the room's breathing, the slightest shift in light through the sooty window, the slightest alteration in the quality of silence that means something is different. She's sitting on the edge of the straw mattress, her feet on the floor, in the particular hunched posture that means her chest is troubling her. Her hair is unbound and grey in the shadows, and she's looking at the corner, at Mare. She's fine, you say, quietly. I know. Your mother doesn't move. I can hear her. Go back to sleep. Your mother makes the sound that means she is considering this option and has found it wanting. She reaches for her shawl from the peg by the door. There are 3 pegs. There are always too few pegs. This is a universal law. And pulls it around her shoulders with the practised efficiency of a person who has been cold for most of her adult life. There's no porridge, you tell her, because she'll look for the pot, and it's better that she know now. I know there's no porridge. There's a heel of the bread from... I know about the bread. She looks at you in the dark. Eat the bread yourself before you go. I don't need Sayadine. Your name, the Irish way. Eat the bread. You eat the bread. You eat it standing by the window watching the close through the sooty glass while your mother lifts Mare from the box in the corner. Careful, always careful, with both hands one under the head, and settles her against her chest, and the baby makes a small sound, a single syllable, not quite a word, but not quite not a word either, and your mother makes a sound back, low in her throat, almost a hum, and the room is for a moment something other than cold. Then the mill bell rings. The mill bell is not subtle. If you have not heard an 1840s factory bell at close range, and you probably haven't, so let me help you. Imagine a sound designed not to wake you, but to eliminate any possibility of remaining asleep. It is a large iron bell hung from the mill building's tower, and when it rings at 5 a.m, it rings with the authority of something that knows it has the law on its side. Because it does, literally. The Factory Acts specify the hours. The factory keeps to the hours with the precision that it does not bring to most other aspects of your employment. The bell rings, and in the close below you hear doors open and feet on stairs and voices, all of them women's voices, all of them speaking in various combinations of Irish and Scots, Gaelic and English, all of them communicating the same fundamental message, which is that it is cold and dark and the day has begun, and none of that is anybody's fault, but it is still all of our problems. You finish the bread, you pull your shawl tight, you look at Mare one more time. She's gone back to sleep in your mother's arms, her face folded in on itself in the complete self-absorption of the very young, and you look at your mother. I'll bring something home, you say. Your mother nods. She doesn't ask what. She trusts your judgment, which is either a great compliment or an enormous pressure, depending on which way you hold it. Mrs. Maloney said she'd look in, your mother says, with the children. This is the system. This is how it works. You're not the only woman in the old wind who goes to the mill and leaves a baby and an unwell mother in a cold room. You're one of many, and the many have arrangements, informal, unwritten, the kind of arrangements that exist only in the ledger of obligation that every woman in a tenement carries in her head, in which looking after becomes a communal act because it has to be. Mrs. Maloney has 3 children of her own and works a later shift. She will look in at mid-morning, when your mother's cough is at its worst and the cold is at its least, and she will bring whatever she has, which today might be nothing, and tomorrow might be a small amount of oatmeal, and the economy of this neighbourhood runs on a currency of help given and help received that will never appear in any merchant's ledger. Tell her I'll sit with her youngest on Sunday, you say. Your mother nods. You go out. The close at 5 a.m. is something you've stopped seeing and now just navigate. You move through it on muscle memory. Left at the end, step over the broken flagstone, keep close to the wall where the gutter is broken to avoid the drip, and emerge into the old wind, the street. If you had to paint this in one colour, it would be grey. Grey that shades to black in the doorways and to a dull amber at the street's end where a gas lamp burns, actually burns, maintaining its small circle of competence against the dark. The tenements rise on both sides, 4 stories, 5 stories, their fronts stained dark with years of coal smoke, their windows showing yellow smears of candlelight from the families getting up, their closes. You can see 3 of them from here, 3 narrow cuts in the building facades, opening like mouths. The rain started again in the night. Not hard rain, not the dramatic rain of storms, but Glasgow's preferred rain, a determined, continuous, business-like rain that doesn't make a fuss about itself. It just gets the job done. The cobblestones are black with it. Your clogs, too big, remember, are going to get wet before you've gone 20 feet, and wet clogs on a cold morning are one of the smaller tortures of this life that you've accepted with something between resignation and contempt. People are moving, women mostly, though not entirely. You recognise faces without attaching names to all of them, the way you recognise the particular trees in a wood without being able to name each one individually. The women from the old wind heading west toward the mill, the women from the closes on either side falling into step, shawls pulled tight, heads down against the rain. Nobody speaks much. This is the pre-speech hour. There will be talk later, in the mill, the kind of conversation that happens in snatches between the thundering of the looms, information exchanged in gestures and lip reading, and the brief moments when the machines allow a human voice to be heard. But here, now, moving through the dark, wet streets, there is just movement, just the sound of feet, dozens of feet striking cobblestones in irregular rhythm, a sound like rain on a tin roof that somehow manages to be both random and unified. You are part of this movement. You're a thread in this current. You pull your shawl tighter and put your head down and walk. The route to the mill goes through the salt market. Let me tell you about the salt market because I want you to understand what kind of city this is, and the salt market will tell you faster than anything else I could describe. The salt market runs from Glasgow Cross, the old heart of the city, where the toll booth tower stands with its clock and its crown steeple, the tower that has been there since the 17th century, that watched the city when it was a small market town, and is watching it now when it is one of the great industrial centres of the world. The salt market runs from there straight down to the River Clyde, 1/2 mile, more or less, wide enough for 2 carts to pass, barely. On a Sunday afternoon this street is a market, stalls selling things of every description, things you wouldn't expect to find together, things that tell you something about what people need. Second-hand clothes and bad fish and religious tracts and old shoes and gin and broken furniture and occasional small livestock and always food, or what passes for food, things that are technically edible if you don't examine them too carefully. On a Wednesday morning at 5:15, the salt market is mostly emptied out, the stalls gone, the sellers not yet arrived, the buyers not yet awake. But the residue remains, the smell of yesterday's market, fish above everything, always fish, the salt herring that is the protein of the poor in this city, and the particular smell of fish market in winter, which is cold and salt and something underneath that you don't want to identify. The detritus on the cobblestones pressed flat by the rain, a layer of organic material that has been building since before you were born. You walk quickly, not because you're afraid. You know this street, you know the people on it, you know which doorways hide whom at what hours, but because moving quickly is warmer than moving slowly, and this morning the cold has a specific quality, a wetness to it from the rain that gets into you at the wrists and the ankles and the back of the neck and is much harder to shift than dry cold. The Tolbooth Tower is visible above the roofline to your right. The clock face is lit from behind, glowing amber, showing 5:20. You are not late. You are in fact slightly early, which is exactly where you want to be. Here is something you have learned about punctuality. Being 5 minutes early costs you nothing. Being 2 minutes late costs you a deduction from your wage. The arithmetic is simple. The arithmetic is always simple in this city. It is only the living of it that is complicated. Past the salt market, left onto a narrower street, and here the smell shifts, away from fish and towards something else, something more complex and harder to name. Coal smoke, obviously, always coal smoke. The air of 1840s Glasgow contains more coal smoke than oxygen, and that is barely an exaggeration. Epidemiologists will later calculate that coal smoke is taking years off the lives of everyone in this city, and that is in addition to all the other things taking years off the lives of everyone in this city. But underneath the coal smoke, something else. Something damp and almost sweet and very slightly wrong. Cotton. You're getting close to the mill. The mill is called Douglas and Sons. It is a cotton spinning as weaving operation on the east side of the city. Not the largest mill in Glasgow. There are larger ones, Haldsworth's, the mills at Bridgerton and Calton, but large enough. 5 stories. Brick rather than stone, because brick goes up faster, and the mills went up during years when going up fast was more important than going up well. The windows are tall and regular, 20 of them across each floor, and at 5:30 in the morning they're beginning to fill with gaslight as the fires are lit and the engines start up and the building begins its transformation from a large dark box into something that breathes and roars. You hear it before you see it. The mill running is one of the defining sounds of this city, and it is a sound unlike anything in the natural world. It is not the sound of water or wind or fire, though it contains elements of all of these. It is a mechanical sound, a sound made by hundreds of machines moving simultaneously, and it has a frequency to it that you can feel in your chest before you can properly hear it with your ears. A low vibration, a kind of grinding breath. In the first weeks, it was terrifying. You'd wake in the night thinking something was wrong, that the building was shaking, that something enormous and structural was failing. Now you barely notice it during work. You notice the silence on Sunday mornings, the way you'd notice an absence of heartbeat. The mill stopped is somehow more alarming than the mill running. The gates are open. The overlooker, Mr. Drummond, a narrow man with a red face and the particular expression of someone who's been making people feel slightly guilty their entire adult life, is standing by the gate with his watch open, looking at it, and then at the stream of workers entering with the particular theatre of a man demonstrating that time is being monitored. You pass through the gate. You do not look at the watch. You look straight ahead. McAllister. Your name here, your mother's name, your father's name, the name that follows you from Roscommon to Glasgow, and that the overlooker uses as a tool rather than a form of address. A tap on the shoulder to remind you that you are here under certain conditions which can be changed at any time. Mr. Drummond. Your machine was slow yesterday. Second bobbin from the right. You know this. You adjusted it yourself at the end of the shift. It's been seen to, you say. See that it has. You walk past him into the mill. The spinning room on the 3rd floor, this is yours. You've been on the 3rd floor for 8 months. Before that you were on the 2nd floor doing lower grade work. Before that you were in the preparation room where the raw cotton comes in. learning what clean cotton and contaminated cotton look and smell and feel like, learning the difference between a hand that knows its material and a hand that doesn't. You know your material now. The third floor spinning room is a long room, longer than it looks possible for a building of this width to contain, with the mule machines running in rows down either side and the central walkway down the middle. Each mule machine is about 40 feet long. There are 12 of them on this floor. The noise when they're all running is absolute. You cannot hear yourself think on the third floor when the machines are running. This is not a figure of speech. Thought requires a certain background silence, a certain internal quiet, and the third floor gives you none. What you get instead is a different kind of thinking, a body thinking, a thinking that happens in hands and eyes and feet rather than in words, a thinking that becomes its own kind of fluency over time. The women are taking their places. You find yours, third machine from the door, the machine you know in the way you know your own hands, the machine with the slightly sticky handle on the second position and the tendency to run fractionally fast on the left side if the humidity is high, which today, because the rain, it is. You run your hand along the frame before you do anything else. This is your habit. Good morning, I'm here. Let's see what kind of day you're going to be. The foreman comes through at 5:45, checks the drive belts, checks the bobbins, checks you, checks all of you. A quick visual sweep. Nothing personal, just inventory. 12 machines, 12 women, 1 foreman, 1 overlooker who will pass through the floor periodically on unpredictable schedule, because predictable inspection is no inspection at all. At 6 o'clock exactly the belts engage. The machines start, and the noise rises from nothing to everything in about 4 seconds, and you are inside it. Here is what spinning feels like from inside it. Your hands know what to do before your mind has caught up. That is the first thing. After 11 months, the machine is an extension of your body in a way that is strange and intimate and a little frightening. You're monitoring 8 things simultaneously without consciously thinking about any of them. The draft of the roving as it feeds in, the tension on the thread, the speed of the carriage moving outward, the quality of the twist forming in the yarn, the state of the bobbin filling, the condition of the neighbouring spindles, the sound from the drive belt, and the air around you. The air around you. Because the cotton dust is always in the air around you, it floats. It is not the white theatrical fluff of pictures, not dramatic, not visible in great clouds the way smoke is visible. It is finer than that. It is a mist. It hangs in the light from the windows and settles on every surface and works its way into every crevice and gets into your lungs in the way that fine things get in, imperceptibly, continuously, day over month over month. The Monday morning cough is what they call it here. You didn't know the term when you started. Someone told you in your 3rd week, a woman named Elspeth, who had been on the spinning room for 4 years and had a cough she called her shadow because it followed her everywhere. Monday morning cough, she said, because it comes back on Monday after the weekend quiet, gets better by Wednesday, comes back Friday when the dust's been building. She said it matter-of-factly without complaint, like, this is the weather here. This is what the air does in this particular location. You have the Monday morning cough. You think about your mother's cough sometimes. In the mill. The way they sound different. Your cough is dry, mechanical, a clearing. Your mother's is wet, deep, effortful. Hers comes from something settling in, building a home. something that was there before Glasgow, but that the cold room and the damp and the poor food have given room to grow. You think, if I get worse, she gets worse. And then you stop thinking and keep working. Because thinking that kind of thought in the middle of a 12-hour shift on a spinning machine will not help anything. And you have learned the discipline of not thinking the thoughts that don't help. You have had 14 months of practice. At 8 o'clock, there is a break. 20 minutes. The machines slow and stop with the same sequence in reverse. The noise dropping not to silence but to the hum of belt still turning. The structural breathing of the building. You eat during the break, or rather, you have nothing to eat during the break, because there was only the bread at 4 in the morning and that is gone. What you have is water from the jug that one of the younger girls brings around, and the brief relief of something going into you that isn't cotton air. Some women bring food, some have food to bring. The woman at the machine beside yours, her name is Nora, from Sligo, 18 years old, here 8 months, has a small piece of oatcake. She breaks it in half without being asked and hands you a piece. You don't refuse. You will return this. Not today, probably not tomorrow, but the ledger is kept, and the ledger is accurate, and you will return this. Baby? Nora asks. This is the whole question, asked in one word with the particular note of genuine inquiry rather than conversation. She was fine this morning, you say. Nora nods. She has no children. She's not yet married, though Connell's friend Eamon has been making obvious efforts in that direction. But she asks about Mare every morning with the seriousness of someone who understands that this question matters. My mother has her, you add. How's her chest? You consider this. The same. Nora nods again. Same as the cough. Same as the cold. Same as the damp and the rent and the fish and the darkness. Same as all of it. Same is not good, but same is not worse. And not worse is something to hold on to. 20 minutes. The machines start again. The mid-morning is the longest part. This is a fact that nobody warns you about when you start at the mill, and it is one of the most important facts about the mill, and the reason nobody warns you about it is that warnings of this kind are not part of the vocabulary of industrial labour in 1847. The mid-morning is 8 o'clock to midday, 4 hours, the longest 4 hours in any given day. The break at 8 gives your body just enough recovery to become fully aware of its fatigue, and then the machines start again, and you are 4 hours from the next stop, and your feet are already sore and your shoulders are starting to pull in the particular way they pull after a certain number of hours of the same motion, and the dust is back in the air, and the light through the tall windows has gone flat and grey with the continuing rain. You work the way a person works when the working itself is the only thing available. Not with enthusiasm ran out sometime in the 3rd month, and not with resentment, because resentment takes energy you don't have, and it doesn't change anything, and it makes the hours longer. You work with a kind of focused absence that you have cultivated, the way a person might cultivate a particular crop in difficult soil, carefully and with attention, because the crop matters, even if the growing is hard. Your hands move, your eyes track. Your body makes the small automatic adjustments, shifting weight, stepping sideways along the machine when the carriage runs out, leaning in at the particular angle that prevents the worst of the shoulder strain. All of this without conscious direction. Your mind is somewhere else. Your mind is in the room, on the old wind. It is with Mare in the box in the cold corner. It is tracing through the arithmetic of Friday. Wages come Friday. Rent is due Friday. There will be something left over. Friday. If nothing goes wrong before Friday, there will be enough for oatmeal and for the extra coal that your mother needs, and possibly, this is not guaranteed, for the small piece of salt herring that will make the porridge into something resembling a meal. If nothing goes wrong before Friday. Nothing going wrong before Friday is the aspiration of every person in the old wind. It is a prayer that doesn't have to be spoken aloud. It is the unifying wish of a street where everything is held together by the thinnest of margins, and the margin depends entirely on nothing going wrong. 3 days until Friday, you count the machine's cycles, out and back, out and back. Each cycle's about a minute, 60 cycles to an hour, 4 hours to midday, 240 cycles, give or take. You're at approximately cycle 40. At midday, the machines stop for the dinner break. 40 minutes, the longest break of the day, and the one that most nearly resembles a human experience, in that you can actually sit down during it. There are benches along one wall of the stairwell outside the spinning room, and sitting down is a transformation of the first order. You sit down. Your feet make an immediate complaint about having been on them for 6.5 hours, and then a longer complaint about the specific quality of the standing that comes from standing on the particular wooden floor of the spinning room, which has its own geography of hard and soft spots that your feet know in detail. Women settle around you. The stairwell fills with the specific sound of a large group of people in relief, slightly louder than usual, slightly more expressive, the voices coming back as the machine sound subsides, a reassertion of humanness. Today someone has a small pail with soup, real soup, or something close enough to it. There is liquid and there is heat, and there are things floating in it that were probably vegetables at some point in their life. It goes around. You take a small amount, just a mouthful, from the ladle, enough to feel warmth spreading from your chest outward. "Heard about the Brennan child," says a voice to your left. You look over. A woman from the floor above, Margaret, been in the mill longer than anyone, has a way of stating terrible things in a matter-of-fact tone that you've come to recognise as not indifference, but the accumulated adjustment of someone who has heard a great many terrible things. "Which one?" someone asks. "The wee girl, the one born in August." A pause. This pause contains a particular weight. "When?" you ask. "This morning," Margaret says. "Bridget Brennan found her cold." Found her cold. You know this phrase. You knew this phrase before you came to Glasgow. You knew it in Roscommon, where the winters were also cold and the rooms were also small, and babies were also sometimes found cold in the morning. But knowing the phrase and hearing it applied to a specific child, to the child whose cries you heard this morning through the stairwell ceiling, to the child whose breath you could occasionally hear when the night was particularly quiet, you look at the ground. "God have mercy," someone says. "The Lord have mercy," another voice. And then the silence that these phrases make. The particular silence that is both a prayer and an acknowledgement and a way of saying, "We know this is true, and we cannot change it, and we will keep going." 40 minutes. You eat the soup, you sit on the bench, you think about Mary in the cold corner and about your mother's hands under the baby's head. Careful, always careful. Then the bell rings and you get up. The afternoon is better. This is counterintuitive. You would think that after 6 hours plus the dinner break, the afternoon would be harder. And it is harder in terms of pure physical capacity. Your legs are more tired, your shoulders are more tired, your eyes are more tired from tracking the bobbins in the flat grey light. But the afternoon has an end. There is a horizon to the afternoon, and you can orient yourself toward it, and that orientation is its own kind of fuel. You are past the middle now. The day is declining, and the machines are declining with it toward the 6 o'clock bell, and the 6 o'clock bell is the door that opens onto everything else. Everything else is cold and uncertain, and holds the prospect of bad news about the rent or the coal or your mother's cough. But it also holds Mare. You think about her hands. She has discovered her hands in the last few weeks, the way babies do. That moment when the thing at the end of their arm suddenly registers as a thing that belongs to them, that they control, that can be studied and chewed and waved at the ceiling with enormous satisfaction. You came home one evening and she was lying in the box in the corner, staring at her own right hand with an expression of such absolute concentration that you stopped in the doorway and just watched her for a full minute. That, you thought, that is the look of someone who is learning the world. You think about that look at your machine on the 3rd floor of Douglas and Sons, and your hands keep moving, and the afternoon passes. The 6 o'clock bell, the machines stop, the belt drive disengages, and the carriage runs to rest, and the spindles slow, and the sound drops and drops and drops to that hum, and then to a deep mechanical sigh, and then to something that might, almost, be called quiet. Your hands are still. It takes a moment, always takes a moment, for your hands to accept that they can be still. You look at them. The skin is roughened in a specific pattern, the fingertips most, then the webs between thumb and forefinger, then the base of the palm where the machine's handle presses. The skin at the knuckles is dry and cracked in the cold, small fissures that catch on the cotton fibres and sometimes bleed a little, slow and dark, and you wrap them in strips of old cloth when it's bad. You flex your fingers, once, twice, working out the stiffness. Around you the floor is emptying. The women pulling on their outdoor shawls, gathering themselves, becoming outdoor people again. The transformation is subtle but real. Something returns to their faces as the machine noise recedes, some expression that the machines suppress, something recognizably private and individual. You wrap your shawl. You join the movement toward the stairs. Outside, the rain has stopped. That is the first thing you notice, and it registers as a gift, a small, temporary, unpredictable gift. But you've been in Glasgow long enough to receive small gifts without questioning them. The sky above the tenements is showing a thin strip of amber along the western horizon, the last of the November daylight doing its best. The mill gates are pouring people out into the street, and the street is suddenly full, the shift change happening simultaneously at several mills in this part of the city, so that what was a nearly empty street at 5 in the morning is now a considerable crowd moving in various directions, with the focused energy of people who've been inside for 12 hours. The cold hits you properly as soon as you clear the mill gates. It's been there all day. It's always there, even in the spinning room, which the machines heat but never truly warm. But it hits differently when you step into the open air, when your body, which has been on operational duty, suddenly has a spare moment to assess its own condition. Cold feet, cold hands, the ache at the back of the neck from bending over the machine all day. The cough, which you've been suppressing since noon, coming back now in 2 or 3 deep involuntary spasms that you cover with your hand, and that produce nothing solid but that announce themselves with a rawness in your chest. You're 21 years old, and you feel 45. This is also a small part of the arithmetic. You know women who have been in the mills for 10-15 years. You look at their faces and you do the calculation, and the calculation does not produce encouraging results. But that is a problem for another day. That is a problem for a day when you have solved the current problems, and the current problems include getting home and checking on Mare and finding something for supper. You walk east. The route home goes past the Tron Gate. The Tron Gate is Glasgow's commercial artery, or was before commerce started migrating west to Argyle Street and Buchanan Street, following the money to the newer, cleaner parts of the city. The Tron Gate still has shops, still has stalls, still has the particular energy of a street where money is changing hands, but it has an older feel now, a more worn feel, the feel of a place that knows it is being left behind. The Tron. Steeple is at the far end, its clock face illuminated by the gaslight below it, and the clock says 6:10, which is right, which is where you expected to be. You have a small amount of money. It's been in the pocket of your dress all day, in a twist of cloth, pinned to the inside seam, which is where you keep money because the alternative is leaving it in the room, and the room, despite being your room, despite being the room where your family sleeps, is not a place that can guarantee the security of money left unattended. This is not a condemnation of anyone in particular. It is simply the reality of poverty, which is that poverty creates pressures, and pressures create behaviour, and behaviour sometimes includes the removal of small amounts of money from the pockets of people who have small amounts of money to be removed. The amount in the cloth twist is 4p. This is what you have, this is what you can spend tonight, and you are calculating as you walk. There is a fish seller on the corner of the Old Wynd who you know, a woman named Agnes MacLean, who has been selling salt herring from this corner since before you arrived in Glasgow, and who you have observed gives a slightly larger portion to regular customers at the end of the day when she is trying to sell down her remaining stock. Regular customers like you, end of day like now. You stop at her stall. Agnes is a woman of approximately no visible age, which is to say she looks exactly as old as Glasgow itself, exactly as weathered and specific and impossible to place in time. Her hands are perpetually red from the salt brine. Her voice is Glasgow by way of somewhere further north, Gaelic English, certain words landing with a different weight. Sayadine. She uses your name the way your mother uses your name, the Irish way, which catches you slightly every time because you don't expect it here. Agnes, what have you got? She has herring. Of course she has herring. She has always herring. But she also has, this is the end of the day, the selling down, a small piece of something else, grey-white, wrapped in a old newspaper. Haddock, she says, end of the day, 2p for the 2 pieces. You look at the haddock. You think about the 4p. You think about the difference between 2p and 4p and what the difference means. The herring, you say, 3 pieces, 2p. Agnes looks at you with the expression of someone who's been doing this for 40 years and finds the precision of the negotiation either impressive or amusing. It's genuinely impossible to tell which. 3 pieces for 2p halfpenny, she says, and I throw in the end bits. Done. You hand over the coins. She wraps 3 pieces of herring in old newspaper, adds 2 irregular end pieces, the pieces that are more bone than flesh, but that are free protein, and free protein is not to be dismissed, and hands the package over. How's the wee one? Agnes asks. You tuck the package under your arm. She was fine this morning. Give her a kiss from me. Agnes is already turning back to her stall, already looking past you at the next customer, but the sentiment is genuine. You've learned to read the difference. You walk the last 50 yards home, the close on the Old Wynd, Left at the end, step over the broken flagstone. Your feet do it automatically. Up the stairs, one hand on the wall, the specific sequence of boards. The door, the steady pull. Your mother is sitting by the fire, which is lower than you'd want it, but not out. She's been careful with the coal, she always is. She has a miser's precision about fuel that was formed in the cold years in Roscommon and has never fully left her. Mare is in her arms, awake, making the small exploratory sounds that are her current mode of engagement with the world. She looks up when you come in. "Fish," you say, holding up the package. Your mother's expression does a thing that is not quite a smile, but is in the vicinity of relief. Bridget and Connell are not back yet. Connell works at the foundry until 7. Bridget goes to the market on Wednesday evenings to help a stall owner she knows, which earns her some food at the end of the night rather than money, which has its own value. You and your mother, and Mare. You build up the fire. The coal goes on carefully. Each piece is deliberate, placed for maximum heat, nothing wasted. The flames catch and grow, and the room, slowly, incrementally, becomes warmer by 1 degree and then 2. You unwrap the herring. The smell fills the room immediately. Salt and fish and the cold outside, all of it together. Not a delicate smell, not a subtle smell. The smell of survival, the smell of enough. Your mother watches you cook. The pan over the fire, the fish going in, the spitting and hissing of the cold flesh hitting the hot iron. Mare watches too, her head swivelling with the focus that babies bring to new sounds. Her eyes are very dark, very intent. "She's been good," your mother says. "She always is." "She's had her nap. She's hungry again." A pause. "I don't have—" "I know." You say it carefully without accusation, because there is nothing to accuse. Your mother is feeding Mare what she can, which is not much because your mother is not eating well herself, and the circle of insufficiency goes round, and the only things that help are time and food, and of those two, only one is available for purchase at Agnes MacLean's corner stall. You cook, you eat, the 4 of you. You, your mother, Bridget, who comes in at 8 with a small amount of oatmeal from the stall woman, Connell, who comes in at 7 smelling of iron and coal and something bitter that might be the flux used at the foundry. You eat together in the small room, in the warmth of the fire, and there is something that is not quite contentment, but that lives in the same neighbourhood. Enough for tonight. That is enough. After supper, after the dishes, the single pot, the 2 plates, the spoons washed in cold water from the basin and dried on the edge of your dress, after Bridget feeds Mare and Connell smokes the short pipe he allows himself in the evenings, sitting close to the small window so the smoke goes out, after your mother's cough makes its worst performance of the day and then settles. After all of this, there is an hour that is yours. This is not guaranteed. There are evenings when someone needs something, evenings when Mrs. Maloney comes by, evenings when the Maloneys on the other side of the wall are loud enough to preclude anything like quiet thought. But this evening the building settles into itself with something like peace, and you have an hour. You sit by the fire. Bridget is already half asleep, leaning against Connell's shoulder. Your mother is mending something in the firelight. She's always mending something. It is her version of Connell's pipe, the repetitive task that is also a meditation. And the fire makes small sounds, the coal shifting, the occasional spark. Mare is in her box. You look at her. She's sleeping on her back the way babies sleep when they are full and warm, which she almost is tonight. the warmth of the fire reaching even into the corner, her arms thrown open at the sides in the absolute trust of sleep. Her face is relaxed into pure blankness, the particular blankness of a face that has not yet accumulated experience. Not even 4.5 months of experience is enough to mark it. She's still essentially new. You think about that. In Glasgow in 1847, the child mortality statistics are the kind of statistics that the public health reformers use in their pamphlets to shock the middle classes into caring about the poor. Half the children born in the worst streets of the city will not live to see their 5th birthday. That is not a misquote. That is not an exaggeration. That is the current reality in this year, in this city, in the streets that surround the one you're sitting in. You know this. You know it in the abstract statistical way that you know things you read. You can read. Your father taught you. You have books, 3 of them, which live in a wooden box under the mattress and which you read very slowly in good light because you don't want to run through them and have nothing left. But you also know it in the other way, the way you know it in your chest when you cross the landing and hear the Brennan family quiet behind their door, the way you know it when Agnes MacLean asks about the wee one with that particular careful note in her voice, the note of someone who has learned not to ask questions that might produce bad answers. Found her cold. You make a decision there in the firelight. The decision is not dramatic. It does not feel like a decision at all. It feels like something that has been building in you for several weeks and has now reached the point of being unavoidable, the way a splinter works toward the surface. You are going to find a way to get Maya out of the cold corner, not tomorrow, not in some abstract future, before this winter is over. What this requires, more money or a different room, or both. What produces more money, more hours, or better work, or both? What produces better work? Knowing more, being better, making yourself impossible to replace. And what makes you impossible to replace in the mill is knowing the machines the way Elspeth on the 4th floor knows them. Not just your own machine, but all of them. The whole floor, the way the whole system breathes together. You sit with this thought. The fire makes its small sounds. Mare sleeps in the corner, and you decide, tomorrow morning, 5:15, you'll get to the mill early enough to watch how the foreman checks the machines at startup. Not to learn everything at once, to start learning, to add one piece of knowledge to the piece you have, the way you build a fire, not all at once, but steadily with attention. This is not ambition. You're not a person who uses that word in the year 1847 in the old wind in Glasgow, with a baby in a cold corner and a mother with a bad cough. Ambition is what the men in the Royal Exchange have in the stories your mother tells about Glasgow. The city as promise, the city as engine. For you it is simpler than that. It is just. I will find a way. I have found ways before. I will find ways again. This city will not decide what I am. I will decide what I am inside the limits it gives me, which are real, and which I do not pretend are not real. But they are limits, not a ceiling. There is a difference. Late evening, the building settles. The Maloney's children stop moving on the other side of the partition. Mrs. Gilmore's distinctive tread ceases overhead. The family below falls quiet. Their particular night sounds fading into the general quiet of the building. Glasgow outside the window does not fall quiet. Glasgow does not do that. But it changes. The daytime noise, the wheels, the animals, the vendors, the sheer mass of daylight commerce. gives way to the nighttime version. Quieter, but not silent. More individual. You can hear separate sounds now, where before there was only the aggregate. A man singing, not well, somewhere down the old wind. Drinking, kind of singing. Loud, unself-conscious. The type of singing that happens when the day has been pushed down far enough that it needs to come back up as sound. The distant sound of hammering. The city never fully stops its building. There are streets being laid and buildings going up at all hours in parts of Glasgow that are becoming rather than being, and the sound of it carries on the night air with surprising clarity. Rain again. Starting quietly, a faint hiss against the window glass, gradually becoming more insistent. Rain on Glasgow is so constant in November that you've stopped tracking it as weather and started treating it as a feature of the environment, like the tenement walls and the mill bell. It is simply there. It is part of the texture of being here. Connell goes to bed. Bridget follows, shifting Mare from her arms to the box in the corner with the same practised care your mother uses. Both hands, one under the head, and the baby accepts the transition with the minimal protest of someone who is too tired to have strong opinions. Your mother mends a little longer. Then she puts down the mending and looks at you. "Come to bed," she says. "You're up before 5. "I know. You're thinking. I'm allowed to think." "Not at this hour you're not." But she says it with the edge of something warm underneath. The particular voice she uses when she's pretending to be more stern than she is. You bank the fire, carefully, each coal placed to slow burn through the night without using more than necessary. The science of making warmth last. You've gotten quite good at it. You check Mare. She is breathing. In and out. In and out. 3 cycles. You stand there and count 3 full cycles of breath in the dim firelight, and then you release the breath you didn't know you were holding, and you go to the mattress and lie down. The room breathes around you. 5 people's breathing. The particular music of your family in sleep. Outside, rain. Inside, warm enough. Not properly warm, not deeply warm, not the warmth of a place that has been warm all day and holds it in its walls, but warm enough for now, for tonight, for the next 6 hours before the bell rings and the whole mechanism starts again. Let me tell you what's outside. Not just the old wind, Glasgow itself, the city you're inside of, the city you walk through every day and barely look up from, because looking up costs time and energy, and you have limited supplies of both. Look up. Glasgow in 1847 is a city in the process of becoming something it has never been before and will never be again. It is at the hinge point. Behind it, the city of merchants and tobacco lords and the Clyde as a trading river. The city that made its money from the Atlantic trade and from the linen and cotton brought in from the east and worked in the mills to the west and shipped back out again. That city is not gone. It is right here, in the Trongate, in the counting houses on Virginia Street, in the memories of the older residents who remember when Glasgow was rich but smaller, prosperous but comprehensible. Ahead of it, something else. Something that is already starting to emerge along the Clyde in the yards at Govan and Partick, in the engine shops at Tradeston. Iron ships, steam engines, the beginning of the Clyde as shipbuilding river rather than trading river. In 20 years, in 1867 and 1877, the Clyde will be the most important shipbuilding river in the world, and the phrase Clyde built will mean something specific and proud and internationally recognised. But right now, in 1847, it is neither what it was nor what it will be. It is in between. It is a city being made, being unmade, being remade, and the people being ground through this process of making are the ones in the Old Wynd, in the Bridgegate, in the Salt Market, in the tenements, in the single ends, in the rooms 14 by 11. Glasgow's population is nearly 350,000 people in 1847. It was 77,000 in 1801. Do the math. That is 4.5 times the population in 46 years. 4.5 times the people in the same streets, the same buildings, the same water supply from the same wells and standpipes that were designed for a fraction of that number. The water is where it starts, always with the disease. The well in the close at the bottom of the Old Wynd draws from the same general ground as the privy that serves 4 families. The city engineers know this. The reformers know this. Edwin Chadwick published his report on sanitary conditions 5 years ago in 1842, and it named this exact mechanism, the contamination of water supply by human waste, as the primary driver of epidemic disease in industrial cities. The report named Glasgow specifically, named streets like the one you sleep on. Everyone knows. And here is the city in 1847, and the privy is still next to the well, and the people are still drinking the water, and the next cholera outbreak is not a question of weather. You, lying on the mattress in the dark, do not know this as a statistic. You know it as a feeling, a background dread, a knowledge without words that lives somewhere between your stomach and your ribs, and makes itself known when someone says certain things in a certain tone. When Agnes MacLean mentions a family on the Gallowgate, when Margaret in the Mill says a street name in the particular way that means something specific has happened there, you know it the way animals know weather, before it arrives, in the quality of the air. But tonight the air is only rain and cold smoke and the warm breath of 5 people sleeping. Tonight it is only this. Let me take you outside for a moment, while you sleep. Let me take you up. If you could go up, out of the room, out of the tenement, up above the roof line of the Old Wynd. If you could rise above Glasgow the way a bird rises in the cold November night, with the rain coming in from the west and the Clyde reflecting the amber glow of the furnaces, you would see this. The city spreading outward in all directions from the cross, the old Tolbooth Tower at its centre like a pivot. Streets radiating out, the organic tangle of the old city close to the centre, the more regular grid of the newer streets to the west and north, the Clyde running west to east below you, wide and dark, its south bank showing the lights of the Gorbals and Tradeston, its north bank the blaze of the city proper. The mills are identifiable from the air by their concentration, clusters of tall buildings with smoking chimneys, each chimney adding its contribution to the cloud that hangs permanently over the eastern districts, the cloud that gives Glasgow its particular orange-grey night sky, the cloud that is the visible signature of 10,000 furnaces and 100,000 fires, and the machines running, and the engines turning, and the city burning its way through more coal than any previous generation could have imagined possible. The river is the thing to look at. Even in the dark, even from above, the Clyde is alive. Ships anchored in the lower reaches, their mast lights reflected in the black water. Smaller craft moving between the wharves. The trade doesn't fully stop, not even at night. Not when there are cargoes to unload and tides to work with. The wharves themselves illuminated by torches and lanterns, figures moving in the light doing the ancient patient work of moving things from boats to land, sugar from the Caribbean, tobacco from Virginia, cotton from America, cotton that will end up in mills like Douglas and Sons, that will be turned into thread at machines like yours, that will be sold as cloth to buyers who will never know the names of the women whose hands made it. If you went further north from the city, past the new terraces of the middle classes, past Blithswood Hill with its stone villas and gaslit streets, and residents who would not willingly visit the old Wynd, if you kept going north and up, you would reach a ridge from which the whole city becomes visible. On that ridge, if the clouds clear, you can see everything. The city as pattern, the river as spine, the mills as landmarks, the tenements as the dark mass that fills in the spaces between the landmarks, the grey-black mass that is where the working lives are lived. That is where the majority of those 350,000 people sleep and eat and wash themselves when water is available, and hold their babies in the cold November dark and listen to the rain. This is what Glasgow looks like from above. It is not beautiful. It is not trying to be beautiful. It is something else. It is significant. It is powerful. It is a thing that is happening in the world with the force of something that cannot be stopped. History is being made here. The Industrial Revolution is being made here, in part in the mills and the foundries and the engine shops, and the price of that revolution is being paid in the lungs of the women on the third floor of Douglas and Sons and in the cold corners of rooms 14 feet by 11 feet in the old Wynd. That is the bargain. Nobody in the city asked you whether you agreed to the bargain. The bargain preceded your arrival. The bargain will outlast your departure. The bargain is the city itself, but you are also in the city, and you are also making choices within it, and that is not nothing. That is, in fact, everything. 3 days before Friday, a man named Declan Healy dies on the floor below you. You don't know it's happened until morning. You come down the stairs in the dark at 4:20, hand on the wall, the specific sequence of boards, and you notice the door to the Healy room is open, which it never is, and the candle inside is still burning, which means someone has been awake all night. You stop. Mrs. Healy is sitting in the doorway, not blocking it, just sitting on the threshold with her back against the frame, her knees drawn up, her hands in her lap. She's a broad woman, red-faced normally, the face that comes from standing over a washtub for years, and right now her face is grey in the candlelight and she's looking at nothing in particular. You crouch down. Mrs. Healy. She looks at you. Her eyes are dry, past crying, or not yet reached it. He went in the night, she says. You stay crouched. The word doesn't need to be spoken. You can see through the open door. The room is arranged the same as yours, 14 by 11, the same straw mattress, the same single window, and on the mattress a shape that is covered with a blanket and is very still, and the 3 Healy children are sitting against the far wall in a row, the smallest one asleep leaning against the middle one, all of them very quiet in the way that children go quiet when something has happened that they don't have words for yet. Was it the chest, you ask? She nods, slowly, like the motion costs her. This is grief in the old Wynd. This is what it looks like. A woman in a doorway, dry-eyed, grey-faced, sitting with her back against the frame because if she stands up, she has to start dealing with everything that has to be dealt with, and if she sits here just a little longer, she doesn't have to start yet. You sit next to her on the threshold. For a minute, maybe 2, neither of you says anything. Then Mrs. Healy draws a breath, slow, deliberate, the breath of someone deciding to come back from somewhere far away. I need to tell the landlord, she says. I'll do it, you say. She looks at you. I'll tell him on my way to the mill. He won't put you out before the end of the week. She closes her eyes briefly. I don't have this week's rent. I know. You pause. Tell him you'll have half on Friday. He'll take half on Friday. Will he? I don't know, you say honestly, but it's worth saying. She opens her eyes. She looks at you with an expression that is a mixture of things, gratitude and something older than gratitude, something that is the recognition between people who are in the same position, who know the same arithmetic, who understand without having to explain it the precise measurement of how much help can be offered and how much accepted and where the line is between the two. Go to your work, she says. I'll manage. You get up. You go to the privy. You come back past the open door and Mrs. Healy is standing now, moving into the room, starting the process of starting. You go to work. The landlord is Mr. Aitken. He is not the worst landlord in the old wind. You know women who work for worse, who have worse stories to tell about being put out in winter with children, about arrears and threats, and the casual cruelty of men who own things toward people who rent things. Mr. Aitken is somewhere in the middle. Not cruel, not kind. Businesslike, in the way that people are businesslike when business is the only thing they have brought to the relationship. His office is on Virginia Street. You go there at 5:15, which makes you late for the mill bell. 1 minute late, which is a deduction, which you add to the arithmetic of the week and feel the calculation shift. The office is a single room at the front of a building that also contains a counting house for a merchant firm, and the merchant firm is clearly the more important tenant because their half of the building is better lit and has a sign with actual paint on it rather than the chalked board that announces Aitken Property Management. Mr. Aitken is a small man with careful eyes and a coat that is too good for this office. He looks at you when you come in, a woman worker, a mill woman, not a usual morning visitor, with an expression that is the visual equivalent of writing something down. Healy room, you say. On the old wind. He locates the ledger. His finger moves down the page. Declan Healy. His voice gives nothing away. He died in the night. His wife has 3 children. Aitken looks at his ledger. They're 10 days in arrears already, he says. She'll have half on Friday, you say. I'm telling you now so you know she'll have it. And the other half? She'll get work. Silence. Aitken's finger is still on the ledger page. She's a good tenant, you say. 4 years, before the arrears, always paid. Aitken closes the ledger. He looks at you with those careful eyes. Tell her I'll expect half on Friday, he says, and she'll need to register the death with the parish. She knows. And find someone to remove him before the day's out. You nod. You leave. You're 12 minutes late for the mill. Drummond is at the gate with his watch. He looks at you. He looks at the watch. He makes a mark in his book that is the sound of money leaving your pocket. I had to speak to the landlord, you say, about the man who died downstairs. Drummond's expression flickers. It is a very small flicker, barely visible, a brief interruption in the flat official surface he maintains at the gate. But you catch it, because you have been watching his face for 8 months and you know all its registers. Get to your machine, he says. You get to your machine. The death sits with you through the morning, not Declan Healy specifically. You knew him only as a sound through the floor, as a shape passing in the close, as a man with 2 specific pieces of information attached to him, that he worked at the dye works on the Gallowgate, and that he had a cough worse than your mother's. Those two facts, that was the whole person, from where you stood. But the death sits with you because of what it means, and what it means is this. The Healy children are now without a wage earner, and Mrs. Healy alone cannot earn enough for the rent and the food and the fuel. And without those three things, the room on the floor below yours will cease to be the Healy room within, at best, 3 weeks. You know this. Mrs. Healy knows this. Everyone in the building knows this. It is the arithmetic of single-room tenement life in 1847 Glasgow. And it is not complicated arithmetic. It is the simplest kind of arithmetic, the kind that children can do. 1 wage minus 1 person equals not enough. The question it produces, in you in this moment, is a question you've been not quite asking yourself for several months. How fragile is your own arrangement? You earn 7 shillings a week at the mill. Bridget earns 4 and 6 from the market and her occasional piecework. Connell earns 9 shillings at the foundry, when the foundry is working full weeks, which it usually is but not always. That's 20 shillings and 6 plus or minus in a good week. The rent is 5 shillings for the room. Coal, in winter, is another 2 or 3. Food is whatever remains, whatever can be purchased at Agnes MacLean's corner, or the stalls on the salt market or the Thursday market at the Cross. Your mother contributes the labour of the room itself, the cooking, the cleaning, the management of fuel and water, the care of mare, which is not wage labour, but which is absolutely labour, without which the household does not function. 20 shillings and 6, minus Connell's 9. If Connell gets hurt at the foundry, if the foundry has a bad week, if anything happens to Connell, and the arithmetic shifts, minus your 7. If the mill cuts hours, if you get sick, if something with mare requires you to stay, and the arithmetic shifts further, you think about Mrs. Healy on her threshold, grey-faced with her back against the door frame. 1 person, 1 wage, 1 night. The margin is thinner than you like to acknowledge when it's daylight. You push the thought aside. You're not useful to anyone thinking this in the mill. You return to your hands, to the machine, to the specific sensory reality of work, the drag of the roving feeding in, the tension you adjust with your right hand without looking, the sound of the spindles running at the right speed, which is different from the sound of the spindles running slightly wrong. Work, just work. Thursday, the day that is not Friday but is adjacent to Friday, which gives it a particular texture, a texture of almost. Thursday also means the scavenger comes. The scavenger, the man who is, in the loosest technical sense, the city's sanitation system for the old Wynd and surrounding streets, comes on Thursday mornings with a cart. He collects the contents of the middens, the outdoor waste deposits that serve as communal bins for the tenements. He collects some of what should probably also come from the privies but doesn't, because the privies are technically the responsibility of the tenants, and the tenants have no mechanism for dealing with them except the scavenger, and the scavenger does not go in the privies unless specifically paid to do so, and nobody has the money to specifically pay for that. The midden for the old Wynd tenements is in the back court. The back court is a cobbled space behind the building, perhaps 30 feet by 20, shared by 4 tenements and containing the midden, the water standpipe, the drying ropes for laundry when there is laundry to dry, and on most days at most hours some combination of children, dogs and people crossing it on their way somewhere else. The midden on a Thursday morning before the scavenger comes is what it is. You know this because you have to cross the back court to reach the standpipe for water. You do this every day, or every other day, or whenever the water in the room runs low. 2 trips if you're doing washing, 1 trip if you're not. You carry the water in a bucket, the same bucket that Mrs. Gilmore upstairs uses for her roof leak, which has been returned and reborrowed so many times that the concept of ownership has ceased to apply to it. The water from the standpipe is cold, always cold, even in summer, and the standpipe serves 5 tenements, which means there is sometimes a queue, which means sometimes you stand in the back court waiting with the bucket in your hand while someone else fills theirs, and the midden is 15 feet away, and Thursday morning Thursday morning it is what it is. You don't let yourself think too much about the water. This is another discipline. There are a great many things in the old wind that do not improve on examination, and the relationship between the water and the midden is among them. And since you need the water and cannot change the midden, the optimal strategy is to take the water and not examine it too carefully. Boil it when you can. Boil it for the baby, for the porridge and the cooking. Drink it cold when there's no coal to boil it. This is the rule. This is also, as you know but don't say, the mechanism by which cities like this get sick. But that is later. That is not Thursday morning. Thursday morning you fill the bucket, cross the back court in the thin grey light, come back up the stairs, set the bucket by the fire. Your mother takes some from Maya, who is having a morning of being unhappy about something unknown and communicating this unhappiness in the only language available to her, which is continuous. You eat the last of the oatmeal. There is just enough for a thin porridge, stretched with water, sweetened with nothing, because there is nothing to sweeten it with. It is warm and it is in you, and it will have to do until dinner. At the mill, Thursday. Elspeth finds you at the morning break. Elspeth, who you've thought about since Tuesday, since you made your quiet decision by the fire. Elspeth, who has been on the 4th floor for 4 years, who knows the machines in the way that you want to know the machines. She is a woman in her middle 30s, built lean and precise like someone who has spent years in a space where there is no room to spare. She has the Monday cough like everyone, and her hands are like yours, roughened and cracked, and she wears her hair pinned very flat to her head, in the way of women who have learned the hard way what happens when hair is not pinned flat in proximity to spinning machines. You've been watching the start-up, she says. It's not an accusation, more of an observation with a question in it. Drummond's routine, you say, when he checks the drive belts. Elspeth tilts her head slightly. What do you want to know? How he tells if a belt is going to fail, you say, before it fails. Elspeth looks at you for a moment. The look is not suspicious. It's more like the look of someone recalibrating a previous assessment. Finding it requires adjustment. You're after a charge hand position, she says. Eventually, you say. Carefully. The charge hand position, the woman who supervises a section of machines, who catches problems before they become failures, who knows the floor well enough to anticipate rather than react, earns 2 shillings more per week than a spinner. 2 shillings more per week is real money. 2 shillings more per week is the difference between coal and not coal, between the fish at Agnes MacLean's corner and the something else at Agnes MacLean's corner. There's no position open, Elspeth says. I know. You'd have to wait until there is. I know that too. Another pause. Elspeth drinks from her water cup. She has a particular way of holding the cup. Both hands. the way your mother holds mare, which you notice because the gesture is familiar, not because it means what it means when your mother does it. The belt tension, Elspeth says finally, the sound. When it's going to fail, it changes pitch about half a day before it goes. Higher, then a kind of flutter. How high? How much flutter? She looks at you steadily. Come up to the 4th floor tomorrow at start-up. I'll show you what to listen for. You nod. Thank you. Don't thank me, Elspeth says. If you get the position, you might end up managing women who don't want to be managed. That's not a gift. I know. You keep saying that. Because I do keep knowing things, you say. The corner of Elspeth's mouth moves. Not quite a smile. Close enough. Friday. Wages day. You don't run to the counting window. You don't allow yourself to run, even though something in your body wants to. Some animal urgency around the coins. You walk. You wait in the queue with the other women, the queue that forms with remarkable efficiency the moment the counting window opens. A queue that has no official structure but has been organised by unspoken collective agreement into something recognisable as order. Your name is called. You step up, the coins are counted out onto the wooden ledge. You count them yourself. You always count them yourself, not from distrust of the counting clerk, but because the coins are yours and the counting of them is an act of ownership, and you will perform that act. And the total is correct. 7 shillings. Less the 1 minute late on Tuesday. That's a halfpenny. The numbers are exact and the deduction has been exactly applied. You sweep the coins into the cloth twist, retie it, pin it inside the seam of your dress. 7 shillings minus halfpenny. 6 and 11.5. Enough. If nothing else goes wrong today, enough. The route home on Friday is different from the route home on other days. On other days you move quickly, head down, direct. On Friday you allow yourself to take the slightly longer way that goes past the cross, past the toll booth tower, through the edge of the Tron gate. Not for any practical reason. The route is perhaps 5 minutes longer, and the 5 minutes cost you 5 minutes of warmth and rest that you will feel the lack of by 10 o'clock tonight. But on Friday evenings, the Trongot is different. The last of the daylight, however thin and grey, combined with the gaslight and the market noise, and the particular energy that the end of the working week creates. The Trongate on a Friday evening is something slightly other than what it is the rest of the week. The stalls are bright, relatively. The candles and lanterns give the goods a warmth that daylight would not. Soft yellow light on bolts of cloth and stacked pots and things in jars and the particular gleam of wares that are being shown at their best. The sellers' voices are louder. The Friday energy in the voices, the sense that there is money moving, and it might move toward you specifically if you call loudly enough. You buy 3 things on the way home. From a woman with a basket of onions. 2 onions, a penny. From the baker at the corner of the salt market who is selling the end of the day's batch at reduced price. A round loaf, day old, 2 pence. Still bread. Still good bread. Better than what you'd have been able to afford yesterday. From Agnes MacLean. Herring, again, but today 3 large pieces rather than 3 small ones. Because it's Friday, and because you have the coins, and because your mother has been eating too little all week, and you've been watching the arithmetic of her face, the way her cheeks have gotten slightly more hollow, the way she holds Mare closer in the evenings, as if she needs the warmth from the baby as much as the baby needs it from her. Agnes wraps the herring. She adds the end pieces without being asked. Heard about Healy, she says. Yes. His wife was here this morning. How was she? Agnes considers this. Moving forward, she says. The Glasgow way of describing someone who's doing what has to be done without any of the appearance of doing well. She's got good children, you say. She has. Agnes is already turning. Take care of your wee one. Always. Home. Bridget is back before you, which is unusual for a Friday. She's sitting by the fire with Mare on her knee, and her face has the particular expression it gets when something has happened that she is waiting to tell you. You put the bread and onions on the shelf. You look at her. Connell, she says. Your stomach drops. What? He's fine, she says quickly. He's fine. There was an accident at the foundry. Not him. Another man. A piece of iron. They were moving a casting and the chain gave and... She stops. Is the man... He's at the infirmary. Bridget presses her mouth together. Connell stayed to help get him there. He'll be back. You breathe. Your mother is in the corner with the baby's box replacing the flannel. She doesn't look up. She has heard all of this already. Her hands continue their careful work. Was it the chain, or was it the casting, you ask? The chain. Were they warned? The chain was inspected last week. Bridget's voice is very steady, the steadiness of suppressed feeling. Connell says the foreman knew it was wearing and signed off anyway. You look at the bread on the shelf. You look at the fire. You think about the arithmetic. Connell's 9 shillings minus Connell, if anything were to happen to Connell. And then you stop thinking it because Connell is fine. He will be back tonight. He will be back with the smell of iron on him and his quiet way of occupying a corner of the room. And the man who is not fine is at the infirmary and his family is somewhere doing the same calculations that Mrs. Healy is doing right now, 2 floors below you. Cook the herring, your mother says, still not looking up. Before it gets cold, you cook the herring. Connell comes home at 7:30. He is quieter than usual, which is its own thing because Connell is not a loud man to begin with. He eats without speaking. Bridget sits close to him in the way that people sit close to things they have been briefly afraid of losing. No one comments on the closeness. After supper, after the accounts are settled, rent portion, coal, the small amount set aside for the next week, there is a remainder, a small one, 3p more than last Friday. You hold the 3p in your hand and think about what they mean. New flannel for Mayor's box. That's what they mean. Enough new flannel to add a proper layer, to insulate the box on all 4 sides, to put something between the cold corner and the baby sleeping in it. You set the 3p on the shelf beside the bread. They stay there all evening, small and specific and enough. Saturday night in the old wind. The building is different on Saturday night. You've noticed this since your first weeks here. The building has a weekly rhythm, and Saturday night is when that rhythm changes tempo. The working week is over. The wages have been collected. The worst of the week's anxieties have either resolved or been deferred to Monday. What remains is the evening, and the evening on Saturday belongs to different rules. The Maloneys on the other side of the partition have guests. You can hear the voices through the boards. More than the usual 7 other voices, different voices, and then after a while music. Someone with a fiddle. Not a great fiddle player, not professional, but a real player. Someone who knows the tunes in their hands rather than their head. Irish tunes, the kind that start slow and build, that pull you forward through them. You sit in your room and listen through the wall. Your mother is asleep early. She tires badly by Saturday, the accumulated weight of the week pressing her down, and she has learned not to fight it. Bridget and Connell have gone to visit his brother's family in the Gallowgate. You are alone with Mare. Mare is awake. She's been awake since 7, which is not typical. Usually she sleeps in the early evening. And she is not distressed, just present. Alert in the way she gets sometimes when the day has given her enough to process that her small system wants to keep processing it. She's lying in your arms looking up at the ceiling with her dark, intent eyes, and the music from the Maloney room is coming through the wall, faint and irregular, the fiddle finding its way through a reel. You find yourself moving slightly, a small rock, the kind of movement that is both for her and not quite for her, for the something in yourself that the music is reaching. You have not thought much about music since Glasgow. In Roscommon there was music, not plentiful, not organised, but present, woven into the ordinary occasions of people gathering. Weddings, patterns, the evenings when someone had a fiddle and enough light to play by. Music as a thing that happened when life allowed it. Life in the old wind does not often allow it, but it is allowing it now through the partition, and you are allowing yourself to receive it. And Mare's dark eyes are tracking something on the ceiling that only she can see, and the fire is still going, and the room is as warm as it is going to get tonight, and you hold your sister's daughter and listen to someone else's music through a thin wall. This is not nothing. This is, in its way, everything that is good about living where people live very close together, the accidental sharing of warmth, of music, of the quality of other people's human evenings seeping through the walls and offering themselves to whoever is sitting quietly enough to receive them. You think about Roscommon. You allow yourself to think about it, which you don't always do, which is a careful permission you give yourself occasionally when you have the capacity to handle what comes. The field behind your father's house in the last good summer before the hunger, the particular green of it, not Glasgow green, not the cultivated parks green, but field green, the green of ground that has been worked for generations and remembers it. The way the rain there smelled different, because there was nothing for it to dissolve on its way down except grass and turf and the occasional sheep. The sound of your father's voice in the evening reading. He loved to read. He read to you every evening you can remember until you were old enough to read yourself. And then he read to you anyway because the reading was not really about the words. He has been dead 2 years. You carry this with the same careful compartmentalization you bring to most things, in a specific place, brought out on specific occasions, returned when it becomes too heavy to hold. You return it now. You look at Mare. She is looking at you. She has stopped watching the ceiling, and she is looking directly at you with those dark eyes, with an expression that is, you realize, recognition. She knows your face. Across whatever gap separates her way of knowing things from yours, she knows you. You say her name, quietly in the Irish way, Mare, 2 syllables, the second one soft. She makes a sound back. It is not a word. It is not even close to a word, but it is a response. It is specifically and deliberately addressed to you, to your voice, to the fact of you. You sit with that for a long moment. The fiddle through the wall finds a new tune, slower, something you half recognize, something from somewhere before Glasgow, something that has followed you across the water. You start to sing very quietly, so quietly it is barely more than breath. Sunday. The shop is closed. The law says so. The mill says so. The city observes a surface calm on Sunday that is not quite silence, but is the closest it gets. the daytime commerce replaced by church bells and families moving in their good clothes to the morning service, and the particular slow-moving Sunday energy of a city that has been running at full capacity 6 days a week and has been told it must rest. Glasgow has 15 major churches within walking distance of the old Wynd. More, if you count the smaller congregation meetings, the free kirk halls, the Catholic chapels. This is 1847, and the Irish immigration has transformed the religious landscape of the city in ways that the Protestant establishment finds concerning, and the concerns are not subtle. They are expressed in pamphlets and from pulpits, and occasionally in the behaviour of certain men on certain streets on certain evenings. You are Catholic. You go to St Andrew's on the Clyde, which is the Catholic chapel nearest to the old Wynd, a modest building that has no pretensions to grandeur and does not need them, because what fills it every Sunday is more substantial than architecture. The faces of people who have crossed the water, who've arrived in this city with nothing but what they carried, who are holding on to something that the city has not been able to take from them yet. Mass at 9. Your mother goes every Sunday without fail. The cough doesn't stop her. The cold doesn't stop her. Mass is the one thing she does entirely for herself, entirely for the part of herself that lives somewhere deeper than the arithmetic of rent and food and fuel. You go most Sundays. Today you go. You carry Mare. She is wrapped in the shawl against your chest, her face turned out toward the world with the particular alert seriousness that she brings to new environments. The cold hits her face when you come out of the close, and she does something with her mouth. Not crying, more like tasting the air, deciding what to make of it. Then she settles. St Andrew's. The interior is plain. No great stained glass, no elaborate stonework. The building assembled from what was available, and what could be afforded rather than from any ambitious architectural vision. But it is warm, which is not a small thing. The congregation generates heat. 200 people, perhaps more today, packed into pews and standing along the walls. The collective breath of them creating a warmth that has nothing to do with the fireplace in the vestry, and everything to do with the fact of them being here, together, choosing to be here on a cold Sunday morning when staying in their rooms would have been easier. The priest is Father Mulvey. He's from Cork, via some years in Limerick, and his voice has a quality that you find. This is hard to explain. It has a quality that reminds you of your father's voice without sounding anything like your father's voice. Something in the register, the certainty in it, the sense of a man who is using his voice as a form of care, who chooses his words the way your mother chooses her coal. He speaks about suffering today, which might seem obvious for this congregation, and might also be the kind of subject that, done wrong, becomes either oppressive or saccharine. Father Mulvey does not do it wrong. He says, suffering is not a sign of abandonment. He says, the capacity to keep going is itself a form of grace. He says it in Irish first and then in English, and the Irish lands differently on the people in the pews. You can feel it. The way a word in your first language hits you somewhere, the translation doesn't quite reach. Your mother is beside you, very still. Mare's fallen asleep against your chest during the homily. The warmth and the voice and the collective breath of the congregation, doing what the cold corner couldn't, producing the deep sleep of absolute comfort. You hold her, and you listen to Father Mulvey say, the capacity to keep going is itself a form of grace, and something in you, the something that has been held tightly all week, the something that has been doing the arithmetic and checking the baby's breath and watching your mother's face and listening to Elspeth and taking the deduction for being late and sitting with Mrs. Healy in the doorway. Something in you releases just slightly, the way a fist releases when you tell it to. Not collapse, not giving up, just release. For the length of the Mass, just this. After Mass, the necropolis. This is your Sunday habit, the one you've kept since Bridget started coming to Glasgow and found this place and took you there one afternoon and said nothing, just showed you. The Glasgow necropolis. It sits on a hill directly east of the cathedral being the only medieval building in Glasgow, the one that survived the Reformation because the town's craftsman, legend says, formed a line and refused to let it be torn down. The cathedral is 1,300 years old in various forms. It has watched everything this city has done to itself, and before that, everything the town did. And before that, the village on the Mollendina burn where a saint named Mungo, or Kentigern, established the first church sometime in the 6th century. The necropolis is newer. It was laid out in 1833, designed on the model of the famous Père Lachaise in Paris, designed to be a garden cemetery, a place of beauty and reflection on the hill above the city. The merchants and manufacturers and lawyers and ministers who have money for proper monuments have been burying their dead here since it opened. The monuments are extraordinary. Columns and obelisks and mausoleums and weeping stone angels, all of them competing quietly with each other on the hillside with the dignity of the longest lasting stone and the most legible inscription. You, Brigid and Mare, Conall is visiting his brother again. Your mother has gone to rest. You come through the bridge over the Mollendina, past the John Knox column at the summit, past the monuments of the merchant class in their Sunday best stone, and you come to the place Brigid found on that first visit, a bench near the eastern edge where a gap in the monuments opens onto a view. The view. Glasgow below you. You've been to places with views before. In Roscommon there was a hill above the village, bare peat and heather, from which on a clear day you could see all the way to Loughry. You have some experience of the thing a view does to you, the particular expansion that comes from suddenly being able to see further than your immediate surroundings. But this is different. This is a city. The whole of Glasgow spreads out northward and westward below you, and the scale of it, even after 14 months of being inside it, of walking its streets and knowing its corners, the scale of it from up here is genuinely shocking. It is not a city you have fully comprehended until this moment, and possibly cannot fully comprehend even now. The cathedral directly below, its tower reaching up, its nave longer than any other building in the immediate vicinity. Beyond it the streets begin, not the winds, you're east enough to see past the worst of it. The main streets, the commercial streets, and then the new streets, the streets that are being laid out in the western expansion of the city, the Blithswood grid, the measured regularity of the middle-class expansion, squares and terraces, and the stone facades that announce arrival. And then further west you can just see the green interruption of the parks. Kelvin Grove, the land the city has kept or been forced to keep as some kind of minimum requirement of breathable space, and running through all of it, west to east, glittering even on a grey November Sunday with the quality of something that is alive, in a way the land around it is not. The Clyde, the river. From up here the river is the key to the whole picture. It is the line that everything else organises around, the spine. The city is arranged in relation to the river in the way that everything in nature arranges in relation to water, It cannot help it. The wharves on the north bank, the gaubles on the south, the bridges connecting them, the ships in the lower reaches, tiny from up here, their masts like pins stuck in a map. You look at the masts for a while. Those ships have been places you have never been and will never go. The Caribbean, the Americas, the India trade, the Mediterranean. They have been in waters under different suns. They have come back to the Clyde carrying things that will be processed in the mills and the refineries and the warehouses and the counting houses, and then shipped out again, transformed. And the money generated at every stage of that transformation will travel upward through the city's economy and end up eventually in the large houses on Blitheswood Hill and in the monuments on the hill you're sitting on right now. And some of it, some very small part of it, comes down to you, translated through the mill's wage structure into 7 shillings a week. That is your position in the system. You know where you stand in it. You knew before you came, approximately, and you have confirmed it since with increasing precision. You look down at Maya, who is awake again, who has been awake since the bridge and who is looking at the city with those dark, intent eyes. She doesn't know what she's looking at. She has no frame for any of it. To her this is simply the world. All of it, everything visible from up here, is simply the world as it exists, without context, without history, without the weight of 14 months of learning that you carry. "Mayor," you say softly. She turns her head slightly toward your voice. "This is where you were born," you say. "All of this." She looks at the city. You look at the city. It is enormous. It is extraordinary. It is also the old Wynd and the cold corner and the privy that serves 4 families and the mill bell at 5 in the morning and Drummond with his watch and the cotton dust in your lungs. Both things are true. Both things are the same city. You're 21 years old, sitting on a hill with your dead sister's child in your arms, and the city that is simultaneously destroying people and building the future is spread out in front of you on a cold grey Sunday in November, and you are alive in it, which is not nothing. That's not nothing at all. The weeks. Here is where time does what time does in the middle of a hard year. It blurs. Not everything blurs. Some things stay sharp. But the accumulation of days, the 5:15 wake, the mill bell, the cough, the counting of coins, starts to compress, to run together in the way that repetitive experience compresses, each day adding its weight to the pile of days without demanding individual accounting. December comes. December brings the cold that November was only threatening. The specific cold of Glasgow in deep winter, which is not the dry, sharp cold of a frost. Glasgow rarely gets a proper frost, is too damp, too maritime for that. Glasgow's winter cold is a cold that comes with water in it. It saturates. It gets into stone walls and wooden floors and woolen shawls and the bones in your hands and stays there, not content with the surface of things, determined to penetrate. The room is harder to heat. The coal, you're careful. You've always been careful. Your mother is meticulous. The coal is going faster in December because the cold demands more of it, and the calculation that was working in November is working harder in December. The margin's thinner. But you make it work. You have made it work every week so far. There is no reason Friday should not produce what Friday has produced every previous Friday. This is what you tell yourself on Wednesday morning when the porridge is thin and the water in the basin has a skin of ice on it, and your mother's cough has been bad 2 nights running. Friday will come. Mayor's box is better. The flannel worked. The 3 pence on the shelf became a piece of flannel from a woman on the salt market who was selling remnants from a dressmaker's workshop, offcuts and end pieces, technically waste, practically useful, lined along all 4 sides of the box with the careful economy of someone who knows exactly how far a piece of cloth can be made to reach. The corner is still cold. The corner will be cold until the building's walls are rebuilt with better insulation, which is to say the corner will be cold forever. But the box is better. Mare has been sleeping 6 hours at a stretch. 6 uninterrupted hours, which is... You don't have the language for what this is. This mercy. This specific practical mercy of 6 hours in which you do not wake to check her breathing, because you can hear it from the mattress, regular and clear, and you can trust it. You trust it. You sleep. Elspeth keeps her word. 3 Thursdays after the dinner break conversation, she finds you again and says, "Come to the 4th floor at startup tomorrow." You go. What she shows you is this. The drive belt on the 4th floor runs at a slightly different tension than the 3rd floor belt because the 4th floor machines are slightly newer and the belt path is slightly longer, and this means the harmonic frequency is slightly different. And when the belt is wearing, when the leather is thinning at a particular section, when a seam is beginning to separate, the sound changes in a way that is genuinely subtle, genuinely difficult to identify unless you know what you're listening for. But once you know what you're listening for, it is unmistakable. A flutter, high, brief, irregular, not every cycle, every 3rd or 4th cycle of the belt. Once you hear that, Elspeth says, leaning close so you can hear her over the machines, you have about 6 to 8 hours before it fails. And you tell the foreman? You tell the foreman and you document when you told him. Why document? Because if the belt fails and he didn't act on the information, that's his failure. If you didn't document, it becomes a question of what was said when. You look at her. Write it down, she says. Every time. Date and time. What you observed. What you reported. I don't have... I'll give you paper. It doesn't need to be much, just enough to exist. You look at her, and you think about the foreman at Connell's foundry who inspected the chain and signed off, the man who is now at the infirmary with something broken that may or may not mend properly. Every time, you say. Every time, Elspeth confirms. She moves back to her machine. You stay at the 4th floor railing for one more moment, listening to the belt, listening to the difference in frequency from what you know on the 3rd floor, recording it in the part of your brain that keeps information the way your mother keeps coal, carefully, nothing wasted. Then you go back down to your machine. Christmas comes. Glasgow does not celebrate Christmas in 1847 the way you might imagine. Scotland's relationship with Christmas is complicated by the Reformation's suspicion of what it regarded as popish festivity. And in 1847, Christmas Day is simply a day like any other for most of the city's Presbyterian population. The mills will close, technically for the 25th. The law requires it. But the energy in Glasgow in December is not the Christmas energy you might know from another era. It is the energy of a city that is cold and working and not given to sentiment about the calendar. For you and your family, Christmas is what the church has always said it was. Mass at St. Andrew's, Father Mulvey with the candles lit and the congregation singing, Irish voices and Scottish voices together in the plain, warm interior of the chapel. The music that your mother has been waiting for since Advent began. The music she carries somewhere in her from the church in Roscommon that she will never see again. You bring Mare. She's 5 months old on Christmas Day, almost to the day, and she's no longer the collapsed, exhausted newness of those first weeks. She holds her head steadily. She has opinions about things, about being put down when she does not wish to be put down, about the specific person she wishes to be held by at any given moment, about sounds and light and the texture of the flannel in her box, which she has recently discovered she can grip in her fist, and which she grips with the determination that would be remarkable in someone 3 times her age. At St. Andrews during the singing, Mare is awake, and she is listening. You watch her face. You are very good at watching her face. You have been watching her face for 5 months, with the careful attention of someone who is also the responsible party. And she is listening to the music with an expression of such complete absorption that the woman beside you on the pew notices and touches your arm, wordlessly, and smiles. This is also part of the city, part of what the city is. This chapel, these voices, the Latin that has been sung in this form longer than Glasgow has had mills, the faces of the Irish congregation who brought it across the water and will not put it down, who hold it in their mouths in rooms and streets that were not made for them, who are making them their own anyway. Bridget is crying. She cries at the Kyrie every year, and has done so since she was about 12, and it has nothing to do with sadness, and she will tell you this directly if you ask. It is not sadness. It is the particular feeling of the music doing the thing that music sometimes does, getting to the place under the arithmetic, under the survival calculation, and touching whatever lives there. You are not crying, but you are close. January 1848. The new year arrives not with bells. There are bells, but they are simply the regular bells, the churches doing what they always do, but with a particular cold. A cold that in the first week of January reaches down into the building in a new way. The walls seem thinner. The fire, even built up, seems unable to hold the room above a certain temperature. You wake one morning and the ice on the water basin is thicker than you've seen it. Not a skin, a layer, perhaps a 1/4 inch. You hit it with your knuckle and it gives with a crack that wakes Connell on the mattress. The cold corner. You check the box before anything else, always before anything else. Mare is breathing. But she is cold. Her small hands are cold. Her face is cold. The skin of her cheeks under your palm has a quality that you have learned to assess with the precision of an instrument, the precise gradient between acceptable cold and concerning cold, and this morning she is at the edge of concerning. You pick her up. You bring her to the mattress, to the warmth of the bodies there, your body pressed around her. You lie with her inside the shawl, pulled tight around both of you, and your warmth goes into her, and her small body absorbs it with the animal efficiency of something that has been cold and knows exactly what to do with warmth when it arrives. She doesn't cry. She just takes the heat in. Gradually, measurably, the quality of her skin changes, from the edge of concerning back toward acceptable, from the border back into safe ground. You lie with her for 20 minutes. You miss the early start. You miss being first at the privy. You accept this without bitterness, because this is the decision that was available to you, and you made it, and it is the right decision, and you would make it again. At 5:15 you get up. You put her, warmer now, properly warmer, in the box with the flannel. You add your own shawl as additional cover, folded twice. You will be cold going to work this morning. That is fine. Your mother watches you from the mattress. "I'll build up the fire," she says. "We'll go through the coal. Then we'll go through the coal." You look at her. Your mother looks at you. Between you, without words, the agreement is made. Some things cost what they cost. You go to work. That evening, coming back, you stop not at Agnes MacLean's, but further, at a hardware man 2 streets over, a man who has, you've noticed this in passing, you notice things, who has tucked at the back of his stall bricks of compressed coal dust, cheaper than regular coal, less efficient but still burning, enough to supplement. You buy 2 bricks, they are heavy. You carry them home, one under each arm, your arms aching by the end of the old wind, and you put them on the shelf next to the regular coal, and tell your mother, the fire stays higher from now on. Where did you find the extra money, your mother asks. I had it, you say, which is not a full explanation, and she knows it. She looks at you for a moment. Her expression is specific, not quite pride, something older than pride, something that is the recognition of a trait she put there herself, the trait of finding a way, of looking at the available resources and the available options and not accepting the limitation as final. Go wash your hands, she says. The coal dust. You wash your hands. February. Elspeth is made charge hand of the 4th floor. She has been doing the work of it for years. Everyone knows this. It has been an open secret of the mill's management. The kind of open secret that persists because it saves money. And in February, with the 3rd floor charge hand leaving to follow her husband to a mill in Paisley, Douglas and Sons needs a charge hand for both floors. Drummond calls you in. His office is a small room off the main entrance, barely larger than a closet, with a desk and a ledger and a chair on his side and no chair on yours. This is also its own kind of calculation. You've been learning the machines, he says. It is not a question. Yes, sir. Elspeth says you can read a belt. I'm learning. Can you or can't you? Yes, sir, I can. He writes something in his ledger. His face gives nothing away. The same official flatness as the gate each morning. The same watch and book routine. The position is 9 shillings, he says, pending the first month's review. 9 shillings. 9 shillings is Connell's wage. 9 shillings is the ceiling you had imagined for your own earnings in perhaps 2 more years. Not now. Not at 21. Not 9 months into learning the floor. You keep your face still. I'll take it, you say. Monday, he says. Starting Monday. You nod. You turn to go. McAllister. You stop. You'll be managing women who've been here longer than you, Drummond says. Some of them won't like it. I know. You say that a lot. Because I know a lot of things, Mr. Drummond. Something happens on his face. The official flatness does not change. But something moves behind it, briefly, the way light moves briefly through cloud. Monday, he says. You go back to your machine. You tell your mother that night. She's sitting in her usual place by the fire, her mending in her hands, and you sit down beside her and tell her in a level voice, 9 shillings from Monday. She sets down the mending. She looks at the fire for a moment. Then she says, in Irish, something that translates approximately as, your father would be pleased. She says only that. She picks up the mending again. Her hands resume their motion. But in the firelight, your mother's face is doing something it doesn't often do. Something open. Something that is the feeling looking out from behind the face rather than the management of the feeling. And you sit beside her and you don't say anything, because there is nothing that needs to be said, and the fire is warm and Mare is breathing steadily in her box in the corner, and the flannel is keeping the cold out, and it is enough. It is enough. Spring. It comes late, as it always does in Glasgow, as if the city itself is sceptical of the claim. March is cold and wet. April is cold and marginally less wet. But in April there are days, specific, miraculous days, when the rain stops and the temperature climbs above what your body has learned to accept as the baseline, and the sky over the tenement shows a blue that has been absent since before you arrived in Scotland. On one of those days, a Sunday, you take Mare outside, not just across the close, not just to St Andrews, you take her to Glasgow Green. The Green is a public park on the eastern edge of the city, the oldest public space in Glasgow, possibly the oldest in Britain. There are records of people using it as common ground going back to the medieval period, records of washerwomen bringing their laundry to the Clyde bank here, records of cattle being grazed, of public meetings, of the exercise ground for the militia, of everything a city commons can be used for accumulated into a single piece of land. The People's Palace is not built yet. That will come in 1898, half a century away. The Nelson Monument is there, the tall column erected in 1806 to commemorate Trafalgar, rising above the flat park with its lion at the top. You walk with Mare under the trees. She's 6 months old, and she's been cold for every one of those months, and today she is warm and the sun is on her face, and you are watching her face make its adjustments to this. She narrows her eyes at the brightness. She turns her head toward the warmth with the same instinct as a plant turning toward the light. She opens her mouth, and the expression she makes is, "It's a first." You've been watching her face for 6 months and learning its registers, and this is a new one. The face she makes at the warmth on the Glasgow Green on an April Sunday is something you do not have a word for that is adequate to what it is. It is something prior to language, something the body does before the mind has organized it into expression. You make a sound, an involuntary sound. Bridget, walking beside you, looks at you. "What?" she says. "Nothing," you say. "She likes the sun." Bridget looks at her daughter's face in the sunlight. Her expression does the same thing yours did. "Of course she does," Bridget says softly. "Look at her." You look at her. You look at the small face turned up to the April sun, in Glasgow, on the green, on a Sunday. The face of someone 6 months into being alive in the world, knowing almost nothing, learning everything. Look at her. And now let me bring you back. Back to the room, back to the attic space. Well, it's not quite an attic, just the upper floor of the tenement on the old Wynd. But in November it felt like an attic. It felt like the cold collected there in particular, at the very top. And now in April the warmth collects there too, caught by the one sooty window, held in the stone walls that have been absorbing cold all winter, and are now, very slowly, beginning to give it back. Back to the room, which is the same room, 14 feet by 11 feet, the same warped boards, the same window, the same pegs with too few of them, but which is not quite the same room it was in November. There is more food on the shelf, not much more, but some. The oatmeal tin is not empty, the bread is not always day old. Mare's box has new flannel. Properly fitted this time, cut to measure from a piece of cloth that Bridget brought home from the market. Real wool, not just offcuts. The cold corner is still cold, but the box inside it is warm. Your mother's cough is better, not gone. You do not use the word gone because you have learned not to use words that claim more than you can verify, but better. The spring air is helping. The extra coal helped all winter. The extra food helped. The things you could do, you did, and they made a difference. Drummond's first review of the charge hand work came in the 3rd week of March. He said, "Satisfactory." From Drummond, satisfactory is a form of praise. You have learned this. You accept it in the spirit it's given. 9 shillings holds. This is the last thing I want to tell you before you sleep. Before you sink into this story the way the night sinks into Glasgow. Not all at once, but steadily. The light going by degrees, the noise softening, the city finding its quieter register. This is the thing about the cold corner. The cold corner is not just a corner in a room in a tenement in the old Wynd in Glasgow in 1847. It is every cold corner. It is the corner where the thing you are most afraid of losing is placed, because that is the safest available place. Not safe enough. There is no safe enough. Not in this city, not in this year, not in these conditions, but the safest available. The cold corner is the best that can be done with what is available. And the thing in the cold corner, the thing that is warm, that is breathing, that turns its face to the sun with an expression prior to language, the thing in the cold corner is worth protecting in ways that the arithmetic of survival does not fully capture. You cannot put the value of it in a ledger. You cannot express it in shillings. It is the reason you count 3 cycles of breath before you let yourself relax. It is the reason you get up before the bell. It is the reason you stand in Drummond's office without a chair on your side and say, "Yes, I can," when yes involves things you have not fully done yet. It is the reason for everything that has any reason to it. The baby in the cold corner. And now the city is going quiet around you. Not silent. Glasgow is not a city that offers silence, but quiet enough. The Maloney family on the other side of the wall has stopped their evening noise and settled into sleep. Mrs. Gilmore above has made her last trip across the floor for the night, her particular measured tread, and is still. The man singing in the street is gone now, his voice trailing off somewhere to the west, following whatever it was following. The rain on the window glass is very soft, almost no sound at all, a presence more than a sound. Your mother's breathing beside you on the mattress is slow and steady. The cough is quiet tonight. Tonight the cough is not speaking. Tonight your mother is only breathing deeply and slowly, the way people breathe when the day is done and the body is allowed to simply be. Bridget and Connell further along the mattress, and you. And from the corner, so faint you might be imagining it, so regular you could set the mill clock by it. Mare. In and out, in and out. 3 cycles. You count 3 full cycles in the dark and you release the breath you didn't know you were holding and you close your eyes. And the city outside the sooty window continues its quiet nighttime conversation with itself. The carts and the distant voices and the rain on the cobblestones, and somewhere the Clyde always moving westward to the sea. Centuries will pass. The tenement on the old Wynd will come down. The old Wynd itself will come down in the Victorian clearances, the city deciding that certain streets are too far gone to save, and they will clear the Wynds and build new things in their place. And those new things will be replaced in their turn, and the old Wynd will become a street that only survives in maps and records and the memory of people whose families came from it. The mill will close. The mills will all close eventually. The cotton trade moving elsewhere. The empire the mill fed beginning its long recession. The Clyde becoming its own different thing. The shipbuilding river, and then the post-industrial river, and then the river that is recovering slowly, the salmon returning. The cold corner itself will not survive. The room will not survive. The specific 14 by 11 space will not survive. But rooms like it will persist longer than you might think. There are cold corners in this city in 1947. There are cold corners in 1970. In some places there are cold corners now. Corners that get the north-facing cold and hold it. Corners where the heating doesn't reach. Where someone has done their best with what's available, and the best available is flannel and held breath and counting cycles in the dark. Some things change, some things take longer than they should, but people persist. People who get up before the bell because being first at the standpipe matters. People who negotiate at the fish stall at end of day. People who sit with their neighbour in the doorway because sometimes there's nothing to offer except presents. People who learn the machines because the machines can be learned, and learning them changes something. They persist. They have always persisted. The capacity to keep going is itself a form of grace. You are warm enough, fed enough, you've done enough today. Your hands did their work, your legs carried you, your lungs breathed what was available to breathe. The fire held through the night. Mare is breathing. Everything else is tomorrow, and tomorrow will be enough when it gets here, and right now it is not here yet. It is still the long dark space between today and tomorrow, the space that belongs to rest, to the body releasing what it has been holding, to the mind unclenching, to the thing that you are underneath all the arithmetic finally, briefly, being allowed to simply exist. Let it come. Let the sounds of the city soften until they are something between noise and dream. Let the cold of the room become simply the temperature of things, neutral, neither threatening nor welcome, simply what is. Let your hands be still. Those hands that have been moving since before 5 in the morning, those hands that know the machine and the water bucket and the coins and the baby's weight, let them be still. Let the cough be quiet tonight. Let the fire bank down to its slow red patience. Let the rain on the window say what rain says. Something is here. Something is continuous. Something goes on without your attention and does not require your attention and is well. You came from somewhere to this place. You came across water, across the distance between one kind of life and another, and you arrived here with nothing but what you could carry and what you could learn. And what you learned this year, in this room, in this city that does not make it easy, what you learned is this: you are enough. Not the arithmetic of you, not the wages and the hours and the deductions and the careful coal. That arithmetic has its own truth and you respect it and you will work it every day. But underneath the arithmetic, underneath the counting, you are enough. Sleep now. The mill bell is hours away. The city will still be here in the morning, enormous and complicated and full of things that will test you in ways you cannot yet anticipate. And you will be there too. You will get up before the bell. You will step in the specific sequence over the specific boards. You will check on Maya first. She will be breathing, and the day will begin. But that is then. This is now. This is the long, slow, quiet descent into the place where you don't have to be anything, where you don't have to calculate anything, where the only thing required of you is rest. Take it. You have earned it. This rest, this dark, this warmth enough. Take it. Good night.